Hello and welcome to Cisco ASA Training 101. My name's Don Crawley. I'm from SoundTraining.net. We're the Seattle, Washington-based publisher of learning resources and provider of accelerated training for IT professionals. This time we are configuring a remote access VPN. This is a companion video to Chapter 8 in my book, The Accidental Administrator, Cisco ASA Security Appliance. Book is not required to follow along on the video, but if you'd like to get a copy, I'd love for you to have one. It's available through Amazon and other online resellers or through the SoundTraining.net bookstore at soundtraining.net/bookstore. Our software versions, ASA software version 9.11 and ASDM version 7.1. If you're using an earlier version, as long as it's fairly recent, the procedures we're going to show you are going to be very, very similar. You'll be able to figure out the slight differences. If you're using a much earlier version, then this probably won't work. But if you're using like maybe 8.3 or 8.4, it's going to be very, very similar. Here's our network diagram. You'll need a management workstation connected via Ethernet and serial console cable to the ASA. I'm using a 5505, but this should work with any of the ASAs. And then you'll need a VPN client connected to the outside interface as well. You can see the IP addresses that I'm using here. You're welcome to use different ones. You'll just need to make adjustments for that as the video progresses. And optionally, you'll need an edge router connected to the public internet. Here are the equipment software requirements. As I mentioned, a Cisco ASA security appliance with a base license and an SSL certificate already installed. If you don't know how to do that, we have another video on installing a VPN certificate. Watch that first, get that certificate installed, and then come back to this video. If you don't want to spend the dough, pretty much every vendor will allow you to install a trial certificate, maybe a 30-day or a 90-day certificate, and that would certainly be sufficient for doing the procedures that I'm going to show you in the video. You'll also need one computer serving as a management workstation connected to the inside interface, and it will need to support Java in the browser, and a computer serving as a VPN client running Windows Vista, Windows 7, or Windows 8 connected to the outside interface. You can use other operating systems. It's just that we're doing this video with Windows 8 and the AnyConnect client for that. You'll also need a console cable connected to the serial port on the management workstation and the console port on the ASA and some terminal emulation software. I'm using PuTTY, but you could use Secure CRT or even HyperTerminal if you want. Prerequisites for you. In order to do this exercise, you'll just need unrestricted privilege mode access to a Cisco ASA security appliance. Here's a summary of the steps. There are a total of 8 steps. You'll create a connection profile, choose VPN protocols and certificate, add a VPN client image, that's the AnyConnect client, configure authentication, configure a DHCP pool for remote clients, configure name resolution servers, enable a NAT exemption, and configure how you're going to do AnyConnect client deployment. So those are the 8 steps. Here's your disclaimer. This video is provided solely as a courtesy to you, our viewer. There are no guarantees whatsoever. Do not attempt these procedures on a production firewall without first testing them for security and suitability in a lab environment. Performing these procedures may open your firewall to the public internet and subject your network to attack, so make sure you have current backups and take precautions, including data encryption and additional access controls to protect sensitive data. Always good advice. So let's go ahead and do the demo, and for this, as I mentioned, we're going to do it in the ASDM, the Adaptive Security Device Manager. That's the graphical user interface for the Cisco ASA security appliance. Let's go over to Wizards, and we'll click and bring down the VPN Wizards. We're going to choose AnyConnect VPN Wizard. And we'll click Next. And we need to create a connection profile name. And this would just be something that your users would see when they connect to the AnyConnect landing page. So give it something that makes sense, like maybe account reps. And click Next. Now choose your VPN protocols. In most cases, you'll probably want to use both of them, but if not, then select whichever one you want to use and deselect the other one. Then you need to choose your device certificate. In this case, I've only installed one, so we'll click on the down arrow, and there you can see it's this one that already includes the common name for our device, which is asa01.soundtraining.net. And we'll go ahead and click Next. Now we need to add a client image. This is the image that your clients will download from the ASA when they connect to the VPN landing page. So let's click on Add and Browse Flash. This is browsing the flash of the ASA to see what AnyConnect clients you have. If you don't have one, then you'll obviously need to load it to your flash. We're going to choose the most recent one, which is 3.1, and we'll click OK, and click OK. And there you can see it's showing as one of the images that's available. You can have multiple ones if you want. Typically, you're going to use the most recent one. I was reading about some issues with Windows 8 and earlier versions of the AnyConnect client. So again, typically you're going to use the most recent one to avoid some of those issues. We'll click on Next. And now you need to choose your authentication method. Now you can choose things like LDAP or Radius or TACAX Plus or Kerberos, and we have other videos that will show you how to do some of those, but for right now we're just going to use the local user database. So we'll add in a username. If you already have one, then you could choose it. We'll just create one, so J Timberlake. I bet he doesn't even know that he has an account here. And create a password and confirm. And let's add it in. And we'll click Next. Now you need to create a DHCP address pool, so let's click on New. This is for your VPN clients. And when I was first learning about this stuff many years ago, this was confusing to me. But what you need to know is that this just needs to be a different address range from the one that you're using on your LAN. So since we're using 192.168.101 on our LAN, we're going to use something completely different here. Let's give it a name, and I like to give them descriptive names, so this is going to be net-10 for reasons that you'll see as I create the starting IP address, which is 10.0.0.1, and the ending address, which is 10.0.0.10. And a subnet mask, I'm going to put a 24-bit mask on it, so 255.255.255.0. And there's a scroll down. I could just choose it from there if I wanted to. I'll show you. See, I could just choose it. Either way works. Click on OK, and click on Next. Now, DNS servers. This is what the DHCP server is going to hand out to the clients. So this is what your VPN clients are going to get. I'm a big fan of OpenDNS, so guess what? That's what we're going to use. 208.67.222.222 and 208.67.220.220. You notice that you separate the two addresses with a space. We don't need to worry about Win servers, and it automatically fills in the domain name based on the certificate. If you want to, I suppose you could use a different domain name here for your DNS search order, but most likely you're going to use the same one that's in your certificate. We'll click on Next. And probably you want to exempt VPN traffic from network address translation. So we'll go ahead and select that, and you can go with the defaults here. Click on Next. And here's the AnyConnect client deployment. You have two options for AnyConnect client deployment. You can either do it with a web launch, where your clients use their browser to go to a landing page and then download the AnyConnect client, or you can do a pre-deployment. There's an MSI file that's available, and you could certainly do it through group policy, for example. But we'll just go ahead and do it for the purpose of the demonstration using web launch. So that's checked, and we'll click on Next. Here it summarizes the configuration, which looks like what we want, so we'll go ahead and click Finish. Send it to the device. Again, yours may or may not have the preview commands function enabled. And now we're ready. Notice that here you can see the new connection profile that we've just set up. And let's go give it a try. So I'm going to open up a browser. You'll notice that I've entered the URL https and then asa01.soundtraining.net. That's going to match up on the certificate that we created in the other video. Let's go ahead and hit enter and see what happens. It's going to whir for a moment, and let's enter the username, J Timberlake, the password, and let's click on login. Notice that it's now setting up Java for installation of the client. Get a couple of security warnings. Click on Run. Analyzing the computer. Downloading the profile, and now downloading the client. Preparing to install the client. Almost done. Setting up the VPN connection. And if you'll notice down in the lower right-hand corner, we are connected. So success. Now, that's one way to deploy the client. You could also distribute it through an MSI, through group policy, or individually, but this is a pretty handy way to do it. You can just have the clients connect to the landing page, and it automatically installs the AnyConnect client. I've had a couple of problems with Internet Explorer, but it does seem to usually work, and I'm not sure whether that's related to my particular computer or that particular browser. We also have videos that show you how to set up authentication instead of through the local database using Kerberos, LDAP, and Radius. So if that's something that might be helpful for you, then you're able to do that as well. Now, it's one thing, of course, to be able to connect, and you have to do that, but it's a whole other thing to be able to access internal resources once you're connected. So I've set up an internal web server running Apache, and it's just got the default page that says it works. So let's go see if we can connect to it. So I'm on the outside right now, but I'm connected through the VPN to the inside. Let's put in the IP address of the computer that's running the web server on the internal network and see what happens. 192.168.101.6. And if it works, we should see it say it works. And this doesn't look very hopeful because it should happen almost instantly. So here's the problem. This is not well documented, and you may not run into this problem. And if your VPN connects and you're able to access internal resources instantly, then good for you. But if you can't, this may be the issue that you're running into. There is an obscure command called sysopt, which is supposed to be enabled by default when you set up a VPN. But in my own experience and in some of the research that I've done on it, it looks like it's not always enabled, and so you have to go in and manually enable it. And so let's go do that. As far as I know, it's not available within the ASDM. I looked around quite a bit, and I also did some research and couldn't find any references to the command being available within ASDM. So it looks like this has to be done within the command line interface. So let's bring up our CLI, and let's enter the command sysopt, SYSOPT, connection, permit VPN. It should be enabled by default, but apparently it's not always. Now let's go back to our browser, and let's try the connection again. So I'll just refresh the browser, and look at that. That one simple command, sysopt, connection, permit VPN, is what is required. Now, just to take it a little bit farther, let's see if we can access a file share on the internal network as well. So I've opened up my network browser, and as you can see, I've got all kinds of resources here. We're not seeing the particular computer on my internal network, but let's see if we can hit it by using the IP address. So a couple of double backslashes and 192.168.101.6. And look at that. It's taking us right to a share on that computer. So it's really important. This is supposed to work by default, but in my experience, it doesn't. You need to enable the command sysopt connection permit VPN in the command line interface. What's really odd is if you go in and take a look at the sysopt configuration, it won't show either way. Let's go do that just so you can see what I'm talking about. So now if I do a show run sysopt, doesn't show anything. Let's try show sysopt. Doesn't even recognize that command. So it's an obscure little command, but it can make the difference between your users being able to access internal resources and not. A couple of other things I want to show you before we close out. One, this is kind of cool. Let's take a look at the client itself. So here's our client, and you can see we're still connected. Let's bring up the properties. Let's go over and take a look at route details. And as you can see, it's showing a secured route to the internal network. But I thought it might be kind of interesting to take a look at it on the Windows box, on my Windows box. So let's go do that. Let's open up PowerShell and show a route print command. So let's do route print, and we'll scroll up a little bit. And right here you can see the internal network connecting through the device at 10.0.0.2. Up here you can see some other routes to the 10 network. Those are all implemented by the VPN client on the Windows box that I'm using right now. If you'd like more information, you can visit our website at www.soundtraining.net. I blog at soundtraining.net/blog. You can sign up for our newsletter at soundtraining.net/newsletter. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. And if you'd like more videos, they're available on our video channel at soundtraining.net/videos. The companion book is available at our bookstore at soundtraining.net/bookstore. Well, I hope it's been helpful for you. For soundtraining.net, I'm Don Crawley. I'll see you next time.